Hello and welcome to the Musical Instrument Investigator. Sheldon here, and we're going to have a look at another musical instrument auction today. This time we're on the website of Amati Auctions based in the UK, and they have this single owner collection which is happening on the 30th and 31st of July, which is next week. It's the 27th today. So for those of you that haven't watched the channel before, I basically just take a quick overview of some auctions which contain musical instruments. Sometimes they're specialist ones, sometimes they're kind of just an auction house that happens to be selling a load of musical instruments. This time Amati, this is one of the regular kind of auction houses that deals with musical instruments, primarily kind of violins, violas, cellos, but they do occasionally do guitars and other things, so definitely worth checking out. I haven't been very active recently because I've been super busy, and also it's the summer, so not so many auctions, but hopefully towards the end of the year I'll be a bit more active. So yeah, we're just going to have a look through this auction and see if there's anything interesting. If you do enjoy these videos, please consider liking, subscribing, turn on notifications, etc., because it really does help. This particular auction, buyer's fee is 22% or buyer's premium, so whatever the final hammer price is, you need to add that on top. If you're bidding outside of the UK, bear in mind kind of import-export charges, maybe CITES restrictions as well, all of that fun stuff. But anyway, we're going to blitz through this. There's 300 items, so there's quite a lot. We're just going to take it really quickly. So remember, this is apparently a single owner collection, so one person owned all of this stuff. So let's just have a quick dip into lot one. It's a cello labelled John Holloway, which is fairly interesting. 1993, so I presume that's some kind of repairer's label. Amati have, quite a lot of pictures here. You can see the condition report here, so a lot of stuff kind of going on with this. Kind of image of the end pin and some of the kind of closed or open cracks there, so it's definitely in need of some TLC. And just a reminder to anyone that's not familiar with Amati, they have this interesting unique feature where you can 3D rotate the bodies. It'd be nice if they could do the scrolls at some point, but it doesn't seem to be happening. And you can kind of zoom in a bit on those pictures as well. So there you go, interesting cello that looks fairly kind of German, I would think. I've got another cello here. I don't think there's many cellos in this sale. Woody 375 on this. Remember, we're kind of a few days off from the end of the sale, so I would expect anything that you see here to at least kind of quadruple in price. Maybe not so much some of this stuff which is already super high, but most stuff probably is going to go up quite high. So violin branded Longman and Broderick, London. So one of the kind of English kind of workshops of that time. Looks kind of fairly legit to me with that stamp, so it looks in fairly nice condition. Some worm issues, but I think that will probably do quite well. Don't know exactly. Maybe it will get nearer 1,000 or maybe more. It's hard to say what the market is, but it's in. Actually, let's check the condition. Oh, we did. I think it's fairly good condition. Yeah, it's not too bad. So a violin probably kind of towards the end of the 18th or kind of 1800s kind of thing. I said we've got so much stuff here. A lot of it is kind of tradey or kind of German kind of stuff, like nothing too crazy. But there are definitely a few interesting bits. So we're going to be fairly brutal. There's a lot of kind of trade stuff here, German, French. But if we see anything interesting, we will quickly stop. So violin label Thomas Green Jr., Stonycroft. Fairly interesting violin here, the kind of moustache kind of F-holes I find quite interesting. I think this person collected a lot of kind of amateur English stuff, it seems, either that or German stuff, so there's a lot of that kind of stuff about. A lot of it you can see is like maybe nothing too crazy, but most of the stuff seems in fairly kind of good condition. But see here again, a violin labelled Henry Travers, Plymouth. And a lot of this stuff probably either kind of German or amateur English, I would think. And you get some kind of curious oddities as well. But interesting if you're on a low budget. And we'll just keep kind of going through here. 13 pages, so not too crazy. See a lot of this stuff slightly bizarre looking. It's again lots of kind of English stuff here. Let's just take a quick thing of violin labelled Chaz Wilson, London, 1940. And a lot of this stuff, looking at the kind of, you know, the making, it's very personal, shall we say, like that scroll turn and the outline of this. So, you know, there's nothing which would make me not believe that that is as labelled. Is there any money in any of this kind of English kind of amateur stuff, or amateur stuff anywhere? Well, that's kind of debatable. But nevertheless, it's quite interesting to look at. A few more things here. I said fairly standard. Some of them are quite interesting, although maybe not super exciting. This violin, unlabelled, that's lost a lot of varnish. Just kind of fairly curious wood here, and what's left of the varnish is like fairly nice kind of colour here. So stuff like that, you know, I'd keep an eye on, and if it's not too expensive, it might be something that I'd potentially put in a bid for. Here's another kind of interesting violin here, the kind of repairer's label, J. Piercy Hanwell. So a few curious things around. There's definitely a few things which make you kind of question what's going on. Here's lost a lot of original varnish here, but on the back it's kind of was once an interesting violin. Heavy woodworm here, all of these woodworm tracks, so that's in fairly bad state, unfortunately. The other stuff which is fairly tradey, this violin has a kind of Perry & Wilkinson label, but I don't think it is one. A few other things which look kind of maybe Czech or German, kind of early 19th or something like that. A few things with kind of Klotz labels here. And then you get stuff like this, which I think is fairly clearly probably as labelled, you know, it's just an English thing, kind of amber varnish. Yeah, so whether or not you want to spend some money on stuff like that, I don't know. I don't think there's any long-term money in that, but if you're a fiddle player or something, it might be kind of interesting for you. Then you get some kind of curious stuff like this, where it just seems like maybe it's someone's just taken a kind of tradey violin or something else and added in these kind of extra kind of inlays in the edge, but it's a bit difficult to tell. Worth definitely having a look at this auction in person, I think, if you can. I think they have viewings in Wales. And then a lot of this stuff looks like kind of German kind of type stuff, or that kind of area. But I think there's some interesting stuff. A lot of it is in kind of pretty dubious condition. That is, yeah, there's some interesting condition there. So I suspect things like that probably won't go for too much money, but definitely worth looking at. Here's a violin that I just quite like, actually, from the F-holes. It's obviously lost a lot of varnish, but that is a fairly interesting violin to me. Lost the most varnish here on the back. I think it's got like a wax seal, which sometimes means that it was part of a collection of some kind, or a church or something. It can just mean absolutely nothing, so kind of worth checking out. Kind of scroll there, maybe not so exciting. It's a shame that we don't have front views of the scroll, because that really is quite helpful sometimes. So I think they're missing a trick with that. But yeah, it's a violin I'd like to look at a bit more in person. It's just this kind of placement of the F-holes, and it's an interesting one, definitely one to watch, but clearly some people interested in that already. So we're slowly getting there. I think there are some bows in this auction as well. So a lot of this stuff I'd assume is German. Yeah, stuff like that. It's like fairly nice wood in not bad kind of condition at all. Currently at £40. 356 length of back. It's all, you know, fairly reasonable stuff. So I'm sure there's some people or shops waiting to buy a load of this stuff. Do let me know in the comments if there's anything that I've missed that you think I should have looked at, but can only spend so much time. It's again just a few kind of really interesting violins with fairly curious varnish around, these interesting scrolls with fairly big eyes there, so yeah, some interesting stuff, but nothing kind of jumping out to me like crazy. Then you got stuff like this violin labelled Snep Erno Debrecen, which, I mean, who knows, could be as labelled, definitely kind of interesting. So kind of European violin, so it'd be good to know a bit more about that maker, not anyone that I've heard of before, but I think that would probably do quite well. I'm sure there's someone out there that knows a bit more. Another kind of curious violin there. Some more unlabelled stuff. Definitely potential. A lot of stuff that is fairly typical German, I'd say. Violin faintly labelled Steiner. Let's have a look at that. Some quite interesting looking violin. It's fairly kind of Mittenwald type kind of thing. Some with Italian labels. Let's see. This I think is fairly interesting here. 105. Kind of very narrow F holes there. Interesting lion head, a little bit different to the normal. So that one I think is fairly interesting. Quite big arching, is quite full on that. 359 length the back. More stuff which is probably kind of English here. English and German stuff. There's a violin labelled James L. Wilson, Greenock, 1913. See that the varnish is starting to fail there as well. That is a really interesting scroll there, with the way that the varnish is failing. It looks like a brain or something. That looks a bit like the aliens from the film Mars Attacks, to be honest. So that's kind of curious. We've got a lot of several violins. Sometimes these can be interesting to look at. Some interesting wood there for sure. We've got a few bows. Now I don't think any of the bows are super exciting, so I'm not going to spend too much time, but if you are interested in bows, and there are a few kind of bows around, silver mounted bow there, Martin Leipzig. The stick looks fairly nice. And you've got some bundles here that we're not getting to too much, and a few books as well. So I think that this is getting towards the end of the first day, because remember it's split into 2 days. So I've got a few bits and pieces, some violin scrolls there that are always popular. Right, we're on to the next kind of stuff now. A couple of cellos again. It's a curious looking thing. Fairly kind of German-ish in its appearance. This kind of big head, which I think they sometimes call the Hinterkopf, or some people call it that. Got some other stuff here which is probably likely as labelled kind of English, either amateur or kind of small production professional, and a lot of other stuff that looks either German or some kind of amateur stuff. Another curious instrument there. That's weird. It's almost like, it's got these kind of details on the edge. It's curious. Definitely some odd stuff around. A few more things here which look fairly kind of German to me. Got a violin labelled John Davies, some interesting F-holes there. I mean, this sale is not going to appeal to people interested in kind of serious stuff, interesting F-holes there. But, you know, it's going to appeal to kind of amateur collectors, and maybe there's a few items here which might be good for a shop. Interesting colour to the varnish on that one. Really, really difficult to tell with a lot of these things. It'd be great to really see them in person. More things here. All sorts of interesting outlines. Let's see. Lots of English labels and Prague labels. But I would say that the majority of this stuff is probably amateur English, or just kind of workshop German, although some of the stuff I think is fairly old, some of the German stuff. Violin labelled Sebastian Potts Mittenwald. Some interesting violins here, although the condition is a little bit off there, heavy woodworm in the middle. But definitely worth spending some time on, if you can. Lots more kind of German-esque stuff here. But in general, I'd say it's more interesting than some of the really low tier stuff. Another Wilson Greenock violin. This is even heavier kind of varnish crackle than the other one. Different kind of scroll, but similar. So yeah, it looks very similar workmanship wise to the other one that we looked at. So that's probably good kind of evidence to support that is as labelled. And you've got some stuff here. So very interesting F-holes. So kind of assume that these things are probably as labelled. And a few kind of stuff that, you know, I see a lot of potential for violins to be converted to kind of Baroque, some nice old instruments that are maybe not in super great condition that could be put into a Baroque setting here. You've got some other kind of quirky stuff like this, but you know, in a really good condition, but just a little bit bizarre. 352, actually, it's not too bad a length. Lots of stuff here. So this is just me just having a look myself. You should probably take the time and look through the catalogue yourself, really. A lot of it is fairly similar, this kind of stuff, very kind of German. But there may well be a few things in here which are kind of a lot better than we think. The real experts out there are pretty good at spotting stuff, so I'm sure we'll see if some of them sell for a lot of money. That's probably the reason why. Interesting stuff here. Finally labelled JWS. But yeah, not a bad sale really. Finally labelled AJ Rope Plumstead. I've had an AJ Rope violin before. This looks slightly kind of different, but not to say that that may not be correct as well. Lots of curious stuff here. All these kind of violins that look fairly German. One of these cornerless violins here. So good range of stuff, especially if you're on a budget. You may well find some cool stuff here. See more English stuff here. This one's quite popular. Violin labelled Mario Garda. So we all know the interesting story about all the Garda stuff. Certainly kind of interesting varnish on that one. I'm sure that will probably sell fairly well, if nothing else for speculative reasons. So that's kind of towards the end of the violins there. We've got another grouping of these 3 violins, I think. So potentially some interesting bits as well. A few more bows. Again, I don't know if there's anything super exciting here. Maybe there's a couple of bits and pieces. It could be, yeah, it could be okay. So worth having a look if you're interested in bows. Got some bow bundles, but I'm not going to look at those. So I presume we're on to books now. British violin, that's a good book. Stradivari. Yeah, so a whole load of interesting things here and some bits and pieces. So that was it, a quick run through of the latest Amati sale finishing on the 30th and 31st of July. Summary, yeah, a lot of kind of German stuff, like slightly older but maybe nothing crazy. A lot of English, amateur English stuff with a couple of kind of things that are fairly decent and a few speculative things here and there. So it'd just be interesting to see how the sale goes in terms of prices, but yeah, definitely worth looking at in any case. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching, really appreciate it, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.